Alright guys, we got everything set up. We got all our pieces cut. We're going to see that in a second. And we're about to start glassing everything in. We have both layers cut for the back, both layers cut for the front, well, single layer for the front. And then we have our inside pieces right here. We had to get a little creative with the front because it was a little messed up on the wedge. But you're going to see that in a second. Enjoy the video. Alright, right here we're just getting everything all soaked up before we put on the first layer of coosa board. Got to get everything covered in resin. Make sure your fiberglass is bare and everything's clean, and then also make sure you put it on the coosa board so you get good adhesion to the transom. We're going to put a layer of fiberglass in between the transom and the first layer of coosa board, and then we're going to put a layer of fiberglass in between each layer to really secure everything. We're not putting a huge horsepower motor on this thing, but definitely better to be safe than sorry. Alright, now we're laying that first section of fiberglass on the back of that transom right before we're about to put our first layer of coosa board. Now once you wet that down, you want to roll it out and get all the air bubbles out. You want to make sure there's no air stuck in between there, else it can cause cracking, delaminating, and all sorts of other problems. So we're going to roll that out with a roller before we put our first layer of coosa board. Alright, we got our first layer of coosa on, and now we're actually putting another layer of fiberglass over the coosa board before we put our second layer of coosa board. Now, we're putting the fiberglass in there just to add some strength. You can go coosa to coosa, but like I said, we're just going a little overboard, making sure we're safe no matter what engine we want to put on there. And again, we're going to roll that out, make sure there's no air bubbles, and get all that glass saturated with resin. Now you can see we're offsetting and stacking the layers of glass in different sections. We're doing that just to create a little bit more strength, to create a pattern, and what that'll do is, overlay and then overlap, and it gives you a little bit more strength and integrity once it's all glassed in.
went pretty tight with this fit up, so we ended up having to tap it in. Both side pieces we did end up having to tap in, which is fine. I mean, you can cut it and leave it how you want basically, but I wanted to get it as tight as possible, so what we ended up doing was just having to tap it in with a hammer and a piece of wood. We were able to get both in without hitting too hard and damaging any of the corners of the coosa board. The coosa board is pretty strong. You can give it a little bit of a tap without an issue, and we were able to get everything in nice and tight without any problem. Alright guys, same deal up front. We're going to first saturate the original glass that we previously sanded down and got all prepped and clean. Then we're going to lay down the fiberglass mat and get that completely wet out, completely saturated before we lay down our coosa board and let that start to tack up. Now we ended up doing this front section in 3 pieces, and I made a little wedge to tighten everything up to go in between there. The boat had like a slight bow to it, so I just figured it'd be better if we cut it rather than it being able to rock or anything. We wanted to get the fit up to be as tight as possible so it doesn't crack in the future and nothing happens to it. And then we're going to put another layer of glass on top of this coosa board to really lock everything in. Again, we're going to wet this thing out, roll it, get all the air bubbles out, get everything completely saturated with resin. You don't want any air bubbles, you want everything nice and wet, no white, and that's going to stop you from having any issues. Now we tucked this under the front just to make sure everything was locked in. We have a nice little gap we have to fill, so we'll have to do this a few times.